ইংরেজি সাহিত্যের ছাত্র ছিলেন। দীর্ঘদিন অধ্যাপনা করেছেন ব্রহ্মানন্দ কেশবচন্দ্র কলেজের ইংরেজি বিভাগে, পড়িয়েছেন রবীন্দ্রভারতী বিশ্ববিদ্যালয়ের নাটক বিভাগেও। অভিনয় করেছেন সাগিনা মাহাতো, গল্প হলেও সত্যি, হাটে বাজারে, দিবারাত্রির কাব্য, এখনই, প্রদীপিসির কর্মী বাক্স, অটোগ্রাফ, পূর্ব পশ্চিম দক্ষিণ এর মতো ছবিতে, বার্নার্দো বার্তুলুচির লিটল বুদ্ধা কিংবা ডমিনিক লাপিয়ারের উপন্যাস অবলম্বনে রনাল্ড ড্রফের ছবি সিটি অফ জয়ের অভিনয় তার অভিনেতা জীবনের উজ্জ্বল সংযোজন। 1961 সাল থেকে নান্দিকারের সঙ্গে তার যোগাযোগ। 1970 সাল থেকে আজ পর্যন্ত নান্দিকার পরিচালনার ভারও তিনি বহন করেন। ফুটবল, ফেরিওয়ালার মৃত্যু, পিরান্দেল্লোর 6 ক্যারেক্টার্স ইন সার্চ অফ এন অথর অবলম্বনে নাট্যকারের সন্ধানে 6টি চরিত্র, বার্টল ব্রেক্সটের 3 পেনি অপেরা অবলম্বনে 3 পয়সার তালা,
I hope we'll see some of you there. Thank you once again. नमस्कार। मैं हमेशा अपने साथ भारत सरकार को और गोवा की सरकार को और मेरे मित्र और बहुत ही सह कलाकार रजनीकांत जी को सबको मैं बहुत बहुत धन्यवाद देता हूँ। रजनीकांत जी को मैं अपने परिवार का एक सदस्य समझता हूँ।
And we're all nervous with dignitaries. Today the performance is not about Bollywood, it's about
Rajnikanth ji, Honorable Member of Parliament, Manoj Tiwari sir, Vice Chairman, Entertainment Society of Goa, Subhash Taldesai ji,
कोई जो मिला तो मुझे ऐसे लगे जब मुझे मेरी जब मुझे ये लगी जब मुझे कोई हुई बता दिया है बदली हुई बता दिया ना जाहिर बंदे जाहिर ना जान में डूबा हो कभी न कभी आ कभी न कभी सब न कभी हो जाए
festival, not being the festival director, but just enjoying the festival, being able to interact in a leisurely fashion with the really talented people who come here. And what an array of talent we have on stage right now. All of them national award winners, all of them also involved with theatre, which I love, which is my field also, because I act and direct plays. And between them, they cover not only various generations of filmmakers, but also they cover many languages of this diverse country. We have Bengali, we have Marathi, Hindi, Tamil, and what you feel it brings to the cinema that you create when you get down to creating films. Not only as actors, all of you are actors also, all of you are directors, all of you are writers. So it's really a wonderful way to gauge the effect of diversity on creativity. May I start with Anant Mahadevan, the senior most member of the panel. If you can just tell us, over the years, what is the kind of diversity you've seen on the sets and how it interacts with creativity?
Thank you so much for that wonderful introduction. And filmmaker in India, I rate him the best as Shaji Karun, the kind of films he makes. And then coming to the West and Gujarat. Gujarat had such a rich legacy of cinema before, like the Marathi cinema. They were victims of the so-called formula from the Hindi cinema, Bollywood, and I think they got sort of deluged. Sort of submerged in the deluge that Bollywood had created, both Marathi and Gujarati cinema. I'm so glad that films like Hellaro are being made in Mumbai. So where are you from? So I say I'm a Malayali from Thrissur who speaks Tamil as his mother tongue, who settled down in Mumbai, does Hindi films and English theatre, and finally ends up making films in Marathi. So I think I have tried to bridge the gap of diversity, as it is called, and make it one. But what is so beautiful about the diversity in this country is that every region has a lovely local flavor. I mean, when you take, you can never forget the great filmmaker Girish Kasravali, or from Assam. Today even Rima Das has put India on the world map with films like Village Rock Stars and Bulbul Can Sing. So I have grown over this entire period. Of course, I was sort of inducted into cinema, into theatre first, and then into television, and then into cinema. And of course it was Hindi predominantly all the time in Mumbai. And I started off as an actor, and then graduated to becoming a writer and a director. More substantial and more significant. And I'm glad to be seated here and very, very honored to be here because my latest Marathi film, My Ghat, crime number 103 by 2005, the producer of which is right here, Mohini Gupta, would you please get up and take a bow? We need producers like her to support the kind of cinema that we want to make. Thank you, Mohini. And we are here not only in Panorama but also the international competition, which is really, really inspiring. So it has been a long journey. It has been
and affected you in any way. You of course make essentially Bengali films, and you've been involved in theatre, of course, in other languages as well.
Discussion possible, and privileged to be in the same panel as Anandji and Abhishekji, and I come from obviously the eastern part of the country, and I've made, as you said, primarily Bengali films, but as Mr. Mahadevan pointed out, any student of cinema, especially ones who didn't go to a film school like me, someone who's a muggle in the Harry Potter jargon, who's not from the wizarding world, he or she is bound to actually sample that or bimolra that you study as a student of cinema when you're watching films as you grow up. I still remember on Doordarshan there was this fantastic slot at 1:30 in the afternoon where they used to show Sundays, where they used to show award-winning films from various parts of the country. So for people like me, I was obviously, as I was growing up, I could taste Indian cinema in its full splendor thanks to those films. I still remember having watched Nayakan as a child, and the first thing that I learned as a child was how to read subtitles. I watched films made by masters like Girish Kasravalli Saab, and obviously Arvindan ji and Adur ji, and so they're film schools in themselves. So it's not only Ray Ghatak, Mrinal Sen, who again is like a staple fare in any Bengali household. But so when you venture out, you sample the cinema down south, you go to Maharashtra, you go to Gujarat, you see Ketan Mehta's Bhavni Bhavai and Mirch Masala. Then obviously there is Hindi, which kind of has an unfair strangle. IFFI or the International Film Festival of Kerala, or Kolkata or Delhi or any of the Chennai, Bangalore. Now, in fact, there has been a kind of a deluge of international film festivals in India. So I guess exposure there is also necessary, and being in this festival circuit, you realize that when you represent Indian cinema outside and you keep a tab on which are the films which are doing well, which are the films which are representing your nation outside, you do realize that actually I think people have now understood that there's a huge coming from various parts of the country representing at the very best, at the very the premier film festivals and all. You have Busan Film Festival, which showcases Indian cinema. So there, apart from a couple of mainstream entries, most of the films are either from the east or from the south or various parts of the country. So actually that notion, that false notion, if I may call it, that Bollywood or Hindi cinema is Indian cinema, that's, I think, it's kind of disintegrating at a very, very rapid rate. So that's, as far as my experience is concerned, I have grown up, my own films have been remade in other languages, so I've had a
You've done a remake of one of your own films in Hindi
I
as
have
well.
done my remake of one of my own films in Hindi.
Yes.
Autograph was remade in Malayalam. Hemlock Society was remade in Marathi as Welcome Zindagi. Then we recently Tamil rights for Vinchida, another film of mine, that was sold. So the common language of cinema, the idiom of, or let's say the power of a story, that travels across customs, across languages. But the diversity or the...
And we also said we will show only national award winning and Indian panorama films from all over the country. We will not show any other kind of cinema. And that became a very popular slot. So you say that became your film school, that became your film school also, and I'm sure you enjoyed watching those films also, and many of the films that you've seen from different parts have been on Doordarshan in that slot. So I think, we need to really convey, Joint Secretary from the Ministry is here, to convey to Doordarshan how important that slot is. Let's please carry it forward. So I now want to come back to that question of...
very overstated rather than understated. So that's one difficulty I always face when, when faced with different languages. And of course, when you get someone like Kamal Hassan to direct you in Vishwarupam, or when you have a Jitu Joseph in Papanasam, then you just do your natural bit and just get away with it, and it looks very real. So I don't think it's actually the region, but actually each director. Like we have a lot of directors in Hindi who have told me, just don't just stand there and internalize it. Put here, oh come on, we want those tears coming out, and go dramatic, over dramatic. So it's not really the regions that matter, it's basically the filmmakers and their approach.
Yes, good. The other thing I was going to ask, prompted by one of your answers, was, is this diversity sometimes a handicap? Is this, lot of languages, a lot of different cultural sensibilities. Does that sometimes become a drawback or a handicap which you have to overcome?
Yes, I was actually.
Or is it always positive?
No, I actually wanted to ask Abhishek something on exactly those lines.
Go ahead.
So, Abhishek, tell me something. So, you said that it's always a help, but suppose you have a particular sensibility in mind, or let's say you have a handicap where you will have to explain that sequence to them because culturally they will not get it. Mm-hmm. Don't you think that's a kind of a handicap?
I think for me, in the process of Hilaro, Tribhuvan Babu is from Andhra Pradesh, right? But the language of the film, the idea of the film and the story of the film was very universal and very rooted. So he actually got connected on the first, I think, narration on phone. He was actually in London and I narrated the basic idea. So final vision or the final version of the film is always from the director. Yes. But it helps in a way because
it falls totally flat because you're not able to capture the ethos and the culture of that particular region. So what has happened is it has destroyed whatever little originality Hindi cinema had because they are all relying on regional remakes these days and they think that this would be big successes and they would reap a harvest at the box office, which it is not. You know, so I think somebody should really wake up and tell them, look, these are rooted in regions and you can't make a generic film out of it.
A big example, I think, would be Sairat.
No,
I mean, Sairat is such a brilliant example of regional cinema, taking cinema to a different level altogether, both critically as well as commercially.
Right.
And then when you have its Hindi remake, you have a very watered down version where I think.
No, what happened was Sairat traveled from Tamil Nadu to Marathi.
Even do a remake, selling the rights. No, this brings me to that very interesting question that in the old days when people used to analyze Ray when he became a phenomenon on the world stage, and people said, how is it? And the analysis was, and most people said this, that because he is so rooted in the particular ethos of the place that he is in, Bengal or rural Bengal, for instance, in Pother Panchali, that it becomes universal. So unless you're rooted in a very, very particular ethos, just as Hilaro is, just as your films are, just as many of the films you worked on now, you do not attain universality. It's that completeness of the experience, the holistic approach to a particular culture, body language, everything, that makes a subject universal. It doesn't become a hindrance. So, how much of a role does all the witnessing of watching and analysis of films in other languages play when you are actually writing your own scripts or on the sets of your own films? Do those images come to you and do you use that diversity, or do you then filter it through your own sensibility and then apply whatever you need to apply? How does it work? I would like an answer from all three of you.
For me, it's culturally, obviously, I am from Bengal, so the roots speak. There I cannot absorb. What I can absorb is the universal language which I have seen all over India. The universal language of love, of pain, of separation, of redemption. And now that redemption, whether it's expressed in